entitled Habaim Yashresh Yaakov. And this is from Isaiah chapter 27, a very beautiful Haftorah. But how about if I put it there in the English for you all? So the verse starts in verse 6 in chapter 27. And in days to come, Jacob shall take root, Israel shall blossom and bud, and fill the face of the world with fruit. Now, this is a translation which is based on a commentary. The actual word in the verse, let's get it here in the Hebrew, and then Ben Sion can help us out with the Hebrew. So, Habaim Yashresh Yaakov. Well, it's not really clear what that means. So it has to do with something about Yaakov taking root someplace, the Jewish people taking root someplace, and Israel blossoming and budding. And according to one opinion, that's a prophecy for the time to come. But as we'll see in the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman is going according to the commentary that it's actually referring to the time that the Jewish people took root in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And from there they took root, and from there they were able to spread forth throughout the entire world. So this is let's pull up the Maamar here. Make this just a little bit bigger. I can find where I can do that. Let's see. Here we go. Everyone can see that okay? All right, so this is for the Parsha. This is the Haftorah for the Parsha of Shemot, which is just in, not this week, not the next week, but the following week. But we'll still be learning it then. So we'll be overlapping a little bit with the time where this is referring to. So looking at the English translation here is going according to the commentary that Rabbi Shneur Zalman is following in this discourse. Yaakov's family, who arrived in Mitzrayim in Egypt, took root, and that Yisrael flourished and blossomed. The verse in Yeshaya is describing the entry of the Jewish people into Egypt, and it describes them with the name Yaakov, with the analogy of a plant taking root in a soil. When the Jewish people grew numerous and were eventually redeemed, they were like the plant that after taking root in the ground, it blossomed and flourished, and then they're described as Yisrael. So as we know already that...
Rabbi, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, Yatzitz is in the future. Barach is in the past. So how can they translate it as both terms as being past?
Right, and how is Habaim? What is Habaim?
Habaim could be the transitive across the spectrum.
Right, or present tense. Right. So we have, interestingly, in this verse, past, present, and future. Kind of. So honestly, we would have to study the pasuk of Yeshaya, and I haven't. So I'm not going to give you, and that's why some of the commentaries come down on the side of the future, that this verse is referring to the future, and some say it's talking about the past. But you're right. It's kind of enigmatic, and you'll have this sometimes in the Torah. It's a how to put this. You don't have you dikduk, right? Dikduk, Jewish grammar. So God didn't start off by creating dikduk and then creating the Hebrew language and then sharing with us the Torah. God shared with us the Torah following the rules of Jewish grammar most of the time. 99 the rules of dikduk work 99% of the time, or more than that, 99.9% of the time. And sometimes you're going to have a verse that's where you're going to have to say, okay, the verse is, you have to choose. You can't be talking. I mean, it's not going to, I mean, I guess you could. I mean, I'd have to open up the commentaries, which I didn't do because I wanted to get into the Maamar. And we could, you know what, we could take a look here and just see if we can see briefly in Sefaria, see some of the main commentaries on the verse, and maybe some interpret it.
Rabbi, are you saying that this commentary is about doing mitzvah in the present, past, and future? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, we're ultimately going to be talking about the idea of how the mitzvot that we do are in a sense the idea of planting seeds and growing things in the world. That's really what we're going to be talking about. The past, present, and future issue really doesn't come up, to my knowledge, in the discourse. It's not the discussion of the discourse. But let's take a look in the verse and see what since we're doing the verse and it's so easy today to open up Sefaria and see all of the commentaries there. So Rashi's commentary, and look at that, we even have it in English. Those who came, right? So Rashi automatically, if you look to the right of the right screen, is going to be Rashi's commentary. Those who, yes,
Abaim can be in the future too.
Well, it's kind
Those
of
that will be coming in the future.
could also be the past.
Right.
Oh, right.
Not past, present or future.
Well,
either they're coming now or they're going to be coming. But it's not they came.
How would you say, oh, ba'u? You would say ba'u.
Can.
Okay, that would be in the past tense. Okay. Ba'im could be present or the future, or like it was mentioned, the transitive. So we have a lot of
Ba'im yashresh, it's both of them in the future.
Right, but then Parach Yisrael, unless you want to say that that's a Vav HaMehapechet, that it's a Vav.
Yatzitzu Parach, that can also be in the future.
Right, so Parach normally is in the past tense, a simple
Yes, but together with Yatzitz, then it's the future. First it will Yatzitz, and then it'll bloom.
I see what you're saying. That's a reasonable explanation.
So, Rabbi, I was just looking here in the Milstein edition for Art Scroll for Yeshaya, and he says that the pasuk days are coming when Yaakov will take root. He says most commentators explain the verse as referring to the future.
Right.
According to Rashi, however, the word Haboim in our verse refers to the children of Jacob who came to Egypt with Jacob. Thus, the verse refers to the past. Do you know what I did for your ancestors who came to Egypt? Because they were firmly rooted by Yaakov in service to Hashem. They budded and blossomed and filled the face of the earth with their fruit. He goes on further to say that according to Malbim, comments of Yeshaya is defining the vineyard of the earlier verses. During the long periods of exile, the vineyard of Israel will seemingly be destroyed, but the roots planted by Yaakov will always survive. And when the redemption comes, the vineyard will blossom and grow again.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, there we have it. You know, past, present, future, transitive. I wish everyone wasn't so tense. Let's go. The truth is that the discourse here is not going to be talking so much. Although sometimes Rabbi Shneur Zalman does go into the tenses, past, present, future, and he'll discuss them. Here, he's going to be going into a different area. His questions are going to be on different things, and let's take a look there. Back to the Maamar. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe here is going according to Rashi's commentary that we're talking about in Egypt, and he's saying here that when we went down to Egypt, he's referring to the Jewish people as Yaakov. However, once we blossomed forth, now we're referred to as Yisrael. And now the questions. We need to understand the connection between taking root and entering Egypt. What's this idea of taking root and entering Egypt? Now the verse says, Hine ketiv ko amar Hashem bora'acha Yaakov v'yotzercha Yisrael. So says Hashem, who created you, Yaakov, who formed you, Yisrael. And so we see that there's this idea of borei, creating, associated with Yaakov, and Yotzer, which is the idea of forming. It's an aspect of creating, connected to Yisrael. And there's a medrash. Let's see what the medrash says. The medrash on this verse comments, Hashem asked the world, Mi baracha. Wow, this is quite an intense medrash. Hashem asked the world, he asked the world, who created you? Yaakov created you, and Yisrael formed you. And as the verse says, Yaakov created you, Yisrael formed you. That's a pretty intense, Jewish-centric midrashic commentary. But so that's, you see the verse. So Ko Amar, the simple meaning of the verse is Ko Amar Hashem Boracha, who created you, Yaakov, and who formed you, Yisrael. But the Medrash is putting in Hashem was speaking to the world and say Borah, and it's made as a statement, not as a question. Boracha, your creator is Yaakov. Yotzercha, you're the one who formed you is Yisrael. Okay. Simple meaning of the Medrash is that the world was created in the merit of the Jewish people in the Torah and mitzvah observance, as the commentaries on the Medrash stated. So why do we say regarding Yaakov the world of the Bria, which is creating, and Yisrael we say Yetzira, which is forming? So for this, we have to remember the four worlds, the four spiritual worlds that are taught to us in Kabbalah. Let's see, how do I erase here? There we go. So the four spiritual worlds are well, I'm just going to type them out here for you. The highest world is Atzilut. Under that we have the world of Bria. So Bria means creation. So Atzilut was a world that was totally God. And inside of God, in the godness, so to speak, you're not going to have a creation, because creation means something emerging from God, right? You understand? So the first thing that emerges from the absolute unity of God is going to be called Bria, creation. After creation, we go to the world of Yetzira, which means formation. And then finally, we have our planet, or our universe, our little tiny universe here called Asiya, the world of doing, the world of action. That's which includes our physical realm, the physical realm of the universe. We're not going to get into the four worlds over here, but we see very clearly which is the higher level, Bria or Yetzira.
Maria.
Bria is the higher level, right? Now, of the two names, Yaakov and Yisrael, which seems to be the superior name?
Yaakov.
Yaakov, you think, is the superior name?
That's the name he was born with.
What? But we see that
Israel was given to him by the angel.
God raised his station and gave him the name Yisrael. V'lo Yaakov Ya'amer od Shimcha Ki'im Yisrael. Because Yisrael is connected to the level of sarut, of authority, and Yaakov is connected to the heel, right? So Yisrael is clearly, it's called the Shem HaMa'ala. This is the qualitative name. So Yisrael, so if you have the two names of Yaakov and Yisrael, let's just put these down here. And we'll do it in a different color. So the two names of Yaakov and Yisrael, Yisrael is the higher name, and Yaakov is the lower name. Okay? Now, each one has a quality that the other one doesn't have. There's no question. That's why we use both of the names. But clearly, Yisrael is the higher name. So the question over here is, why in this verse is the higher world, Bria, associated with the lower name, Yaakov, and the lower world, Yitzir, is associated with the higher name, Yisrael? That's the question the Alter Rebbe is asking. You don't have to like it, but that's his question. Yes, Yisrael or Yehudit, somebody has a question?
Yes, the question I had, you said earlier that the world was created for the Jewish people, but at the time of creation, there were no Jewish people. So how do you reconcile that?
How do I reconcile that? Well, that's a very good question, right? God created the world for the Jewish people, and then you have Adam and Chava. To answer this question very briefly, the Kabbalistic explanation of this is as follows. And that is, okay, first I'll give you the simple explanation. The simple explanation is it was created for the Jewish people that would subsequently come about. And in order for the Jewish people to come about, first there had to be a world. There had to be animals. There had to be fauna and flora, right? There had to be the stars and the moon, right? And there had to be people. And amidst these people would come about the Jewish people. So the very simple explanation is it was created for the Jewish people that would emerge subsequently. It's very simple. That's the Pshat level. According to the Kabbalah level, the Jewish people were incorporated within Adam. So originally, when Adam was created, Adam and Chava were created, they were the highest human form possible. They were created on the highest spiritual level possible, and they thus had inside of them, they had the potentiality of the Jewish people that was realized in them for that short time until the sin of before the sin of the tree of knowledge, right? Came the sin of the Eitz HaChaim, Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, and through that sin, now that level became concealed and on hold until it says in the Zohar that and the Medrash as well, that Shufraya de Yaakov Ke'en Shufraya de Adam Harishon, that the visage of Yaakov, of our forefather Yaakov, was the same. He had the same visage, the same appearance as Adam Harishon, because he now was going to be the extension of that idea that was originally there with Adam. So that's the more Kabbalistic interpretation.
Well, that kind of fits in, excuse me, Rabbi, that fits in with the concept of the infinitude of Hashem, who has the ability to see the past, present, and future. So that kind of fits into our concept of Hashem.
Yes, but it also fits into according to the unfolding of time set in past, in that everything happens in its particular time. In other words, in order for that to make sense, you don't have to you don't have to rely on that God is above time. I mean, God created the world for the Jewish people. The Jewish people were, so to speak, spiritually existent within Adam at the very beginning. But then that path became that path became distorted with the sin, and now that whole idea of the Jewish people is going to wait until Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov. Let's move on. Somebody else.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. And Reb David. What would you like to add to this
I
conversation?
don't know if you can hear me because I lost my voice. So if it's too hard to hear me, I won't speak.
We can hear you just fine. You've a very, your voice is now is very appealing. It's very low and gravelly, and it's very, it's very interesting to listen to now.
So where does Yaakov make an appearance? In the Torah. And it says that the Torah was created 2,000 years before, 2,000 years, 2,000 generations before the creation of the world.
2,000 years.
Yeah. So, yeah. So as far as chronologically, there was no Yaakov. So how could he create the world? He is found in the Torah, and he's embodied in the tzaddikim. It says Hashem consulted with the tzaddikim, the souls of the tzaddikim, should he create the world. And those are the tzaddikim, which include Yaakov Avinu. And he's in certain times the choicest of the avos, of the forefathers, because he's the only one that didn't have children that they think off the path. His children all became the tribes of Israel, unlike Abraham and Isaac.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, when you speak, it has more gravitas.
Gravity.
Your voice will return to you, but while you have it, you have to. One has to listen to you because you're speaking with such gravitas.
Gravel. It's called gravel.
No, it's called gravity.
That too, right? Age and gravity. What are you going to do? All right. Moving right along. Were there any other questions on this? We're going to be slow moving here, but past this. So this was just the question of the Alter Rebbe. And I was going through the worlds just to explain the, this is the question of the Alter Rebbe here. All right. Now it is known, and here the Alter Rebbe goes into, this is a recurring theme in Torah Or and Likutei Torah. It is known that the soul descends into this world for doing the mitzvot today, or as it's a verse, Hayom la'asotam, as it says in Devarim, chapter 7, verse 11, that Hayom la'asotam, that you have to do it today, right? In other words, that is meaning as opposed to Olam Haba. The purpose of creation and the purpose of existence is not for Olam Haba. And this is a major idea that Chassidus puts into context. The whole discussion of Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh, oftentimes in religion and Judaism, people get confused and they are thinking that the main thing is Olam Haba, the world to come. And I'm doing all the work here in order to get to Olam Haba, to get to the world to come, for the afterlife. And that's where it's really at. And Chassidut disavows us of this notion and tells us very clearly, no, Hayom la'asotam, the time to do the work and the purpose for creation, the whole reason why the neshama was created was to descend into this world to do our work. The purpose for the creation of the worlds is described as Bereshit, first word, of course, of the Torah. And we say Bereshit, so the Medrash says, is Bet Reshit. There are two beginnings, two things that are called Reshit, two things that are called first and foremost. So for the first, meaning for the sake of Yisrael, who are called Reshit, as the verse says, Yisrael is the sacred to Hashem, Reshit Tevuato. We are called, the Jewish people are called Reshit. And the Torah, the other thing is the Torah is called Reshit. So I think the idea of Reshit here is really, we're talking about it's like the main thing, right? The Reshit, the first, what's the main thing here? So we're saying first, but the first really having a meaning and a connotation of what's the main thing here? And of course, we have to remember what Stephen Covey tells us, right? That the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. It's very easy to remember. So now we another question, which is connected. This question is adjacent to the opening of the Maamar. We need to understand, what does this have to do with Yisrael? In what way are the Jewish people considered the first of his grain? Reshit Tevuato. The prophet Jeremiah refers to it as Reshit Tevuato, the first of his grain. So we have again the beginning of the Maamar. We talk about Habaim, the one who were coming, Yashresh Yaakov. The Yaakov took root, a plant reference. And we are called Reshit Tevuato, the first of his grain. So what's up with this whole grain analogy? Also, what is the idea of grain lamala? What is the idea of, what's the spiritual idea of grain? What is this? Because we're talking about grain. We don't mean that the Jewish people are physically grain. Obviously, we're not grain, but it's a metaphor. There's a concept, and there's a spiritual construct in which we have this idea of grain. So what is the spiritual explanation of what the idea of grain is all about? And this is what the Alter Rebbe is now going to launch into. Now, regarding mitzvos, the Zohar says that they are like garments. So now, as we do in Chassidus, oftentimes we'll go from one analogy, one metaphor to another metaphor. So now we're going to move on to the idea of garments. And this is a very, very oft-repeated idea in Chassidic philosophy. And I want to explain here, we talk about garments, and we're going to be talking about levushim. Hold on a second. We serve God through mitzvot. Okay, I'm not sure what that was coming in on. Sorry, I missed that comment when it was probably relevant. Apologize. So, garments, levushim.
It just came in now.
Oh, it just came in now. Okay, we serve God through the mitzvot, yes, but I'm not sure how it's connected to the idea of grain. Was that from you, Susan? Anyway.
Yes, I wanted to say something before, but
Please. Okay.
I for some reason I feel like God chose to he needed a place to stay and he needed something to do. So that's why he created the Jewish people. I don't feel like do you understand what I'm saying? That I don't feel like it's unto him. We came to make it interesting for him.
I would just modify what you said in one slight way.
I'm not trying to be a heretic.
No, of course not. But I would just modify that just slightly and say that not that God needed, but God wanted. This is indeed what the Medrash says, that this is what God desired. So it wasn't a need, but it was a desire. And one could split hairs about the difference between a desire and a need. But we all know, if we raise children, the difference between I need something and I want something, right? There's a difference between a need and a want. So I want to speak just a moment about garments. So when we use the word garment in Chassidic and Kabbalistic nomenclature, we have a little bit of a problem because for us, garments are simply clothing, right? Garments are simply clothing, right? But that's not what we mean when we say garment. Whenever we say a levush, what we're talking about is, it's hard to find the right terminology. In computer language, we would call it an interface, a way to interact with something. So,
it's not us, it's around us.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's not us, that's for sure, right? But the idea of a garment is something that allows you to interact with something. So if you were You know, if you're going to speak to a young child, right, you're going to put on a persona of, you're going to put on a certain persona, right, to be able to interact with that child. By way of analogy, if you think of an astronaut, so an astronaut puts on his spacesuit so he can exist in and interact with his environment, right? Or a pair of gardening gloves. The gardening gloves allow you to interact with the dirt and everything and not get harmed, right? But it's a garment is more than just something that we're putting on, you know, as clothing, but rather it's something that allows us to express something to a certain. It's an interaction. It allows an interaction and a relationship with something. And so when we're saying the word garment, I just want to define the word before we get into it, because sometimes we use the word and then we kind of get stuck in the language of it. And we think a garment, it's just a jacket. A jacket is just a jacket. No, well, that's not what we mean. We mean something. It's a mode of interaction is really what we're talking about when we're talking about garments. So let's go back to what the Zohar says about a garment. Now, regarding the mitzvahs, the Zohar says they are like garments, levushim. And every Jew has to fulfill all of the 613 mitzvos, aside from mitzvahs that the king fulfills on behalf of all of the Jewish people. And all of the mitzvahs must be performed by everyone. And if not performed in a person's lifetime, then it must be done during different incarnations or fulfilled through becoming incorporated as part of a different soul. For example, the soul of a Kohen or a Levi have specific mitzvahs that other Jews do not have, in order for the soul to become clothed in all of the 613 mitzvahs. So we have, imagine this, our way, in order for us to be able to relate to God at the highest level, we need to put on, our soul needs to put on a garment, a suit, a space suit, shall we? Now, how many different components does the space suit have? It has the exterior, it has its reflective material, right? It has the insulation, it has the breathing apparatus. A spacesuit has many, many different components. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm not even a novice. I just have seen the pictures and I'm assuming that a spacesuit has got many different aspects to its functionality. So imagine this. We're putting on, so to speak, this suit, this garment of mitzvot. And each of the 613 mitzvot is another component, another aspect to make this a full functioning suit for us to wear, to be able to relate to Hashem on the highest level. And so the difficult news is that we have to fulfill all of every single one of the 613 mitzvot, except for the mitzvot, I guess, of a king, and I'm going to assume the mitzvot of a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, as well. Those are done by those people on behalf of all of the Jewish people, so we're covered. But the rest so now we have about 600 mitzvot left that we each have to accomplish. So that's the difficult news. The good news is you don't have to do it all in one lifetime. So this brings us into the whole discussion of reincarnation, Gilgulim, where the Kabbalah speaks very much about reincarnation. And the soul, one of the reasons why a soul needs to be reincarnated to come back into this world is to continue to fulfill its mission and to fulfill each of the 613 mitzvot. And so so that we create a full wardrobe for the soul. Now you'll ask me questions on some problem I may not be able to answer, but you can go ahead and ask.
My question here is if the fulfillment of mitzvahs in certain cases has to be it has to be given the uncompleted action items, if you will, are given to another soul. So what I'm losing perspective on the individual soul from which we started the discussion.
Okay, very good. This is a key component of reincarnation according to Judaism, and Some people don't even like the word reincarnation because it has a connotation of it being a different soul. It's not really a different soul. You see, all of the souls, the whole notion of souls are not about our individuality. It's about our total oneness and absolute oneness. And
Rabbi,
yes.
what about we go through
You know
seven?
what, Moshe, beforehand, I just want to answer Yisrael's question first, please.
Okay,
And then we'll get to, yeah. So we have a soul, there's a root soul, and that soul is going to have many, many parts. So each time it's being reincarnated, it's not really a different soul. It's a different, going to be a different individuation of the same soul. And in reincarnation, and ultimately in the resurrection of the dead, each of those aspects are going to come back to life, but they're really all coming from one soul. So we each have a unique soul on the one hand, but on the other hand, all of these souls really have a oneness. And so there is one soul that has many, many aspects to it and great potential. And that soul is going to be coming. So by way of example, I just want to answer this, try to answer this briefly. So the first time it comes into the world, it fulfills 100 mitzvahs. So those 100 mitzvahs are elevated above, and now the soul comes down again to cover the rest of the mitzvot, right? And then whatever mitzvot it fulfills, those souls are, that's elevated, and then the soul comes down again. And so there's going to be different aspects to one soul, really. So we could have these the Arizal would go and explain to people. The Arizal had the vision not only to be able to see a person's neshama, but the Arizal would be able to see people's past incarnations. And he revealed to his student, Reb Chaim Vital, for instance, his 6 previous incarnations and who they were and why he had to come back each time and what he had to accomplish. But here the Alter Rebbe is focusing on one particular aspect of that, which is the fulfillment of all of the mitzvah. Now it's funny because this is just a little not throwaway, but this is just a little paragraph that the Alter Rebbe is saying. Of course, this could be a whole 2 classes in and of itself. Sorry, Moshe, I stopped you in the middle there.
My understanding is that there's 7 Gilgulim that we go through in this, in this world. We have to come back 7 times. That's the first question I have. And so, I mean, if the neshama is, enters into a higher madrega, what I'm trying to figure out is the soul is really, it's one. It's when we say the Shema, we're saying that there's one God. Okay, but that means I would think that would be connected with the neshama, which is one echad, and if it comes back in 7 different ways, it's just behavioral changes that alter it. It's not the actual soul itself that's different. But I mean, from what you just said.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's all about how the one now becomes individuated into different parts, into different aspects. But it doesn't lose the oneness, or it shouldn't lose the oneness. We have so many hands raised. I'm going to try to go in order here. Yehudis, please.
Yes, please. Some of the mitzvot are only pertain to men, and some only to women.
Yes.
So are women always reincarnated as women, or they come back as a man in order to do a man's?
We're going to cover the whole spectrum here. Women generally come back as women. Men generally come back as men. And the Arizal says the purpose why women have to come back most of the time is to help out their husbands once again.
Right, so they come back together?
So that's the idea.
Do they come back together?
That's the idea. It may not always happen exactly that way, but yeah. Or it could have been a husband from a previous incarnation. It's all different kinds of possibilities. But this is what the Arizal writes in Shar HaGilgulim, and the gate of, and the idea of 7 times, Moshe. I don't recall seeing that in Shar HaGilgulim. That could be from some other Kabbalistic source, the idea of 7. And there's a lot of different material. It's not monolithic. It's not all one opinion of how this all occurs. I haven't heard the idea of 7 times before.
Yeah, I heard that actually from a rabbi in Miami Beach I'm sorry, traffic here. That's what I heard in a rabbi that I used to attend his Beit Knesset in Miami Beach. He said that there's 7 Gilgal.
Yeah, but he doesn't
that we go through.
Right. Okay. So as I'm saying, I'm sure if the rabbi said it, the rabbi has a source for that. I'm just not familiar with that. I'm just mentioning that may not be.
And then we're gonna know who the other people were that existed in those other reincarnations. That we'll meet them again. We're gonna meet all 7 of them again.
Interesting. Okay.
I have a memory of a prior incarnation in which I was a little girl when I was killed. I remember being killed. And also my husband and I always felt like we were together previous incarnation because we have so many things that no reason why you should know them.
So I have to ask you this question. Is he still not cleaning up after himself?
He's a good boy.
Okay.
And I don't think that's a male trait anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, it would be like I could see the wife coming back and saying, and again I'm here to clean up after you.
Well, I do say that.
But anyway, seriously, wow. So you had a memory of being killed. Do you know where this was?
Absolutely. There was a pogrom. I was about 7 or 8 years of age. I remember what I was wearing, so I always loved clothes. I had brown button shoes on and a brown dress. And there was a man. There was one man on a horse. There was a soldier on a horse and another soldier with horse with a spear through me. And it became very vivid. The one man was holding a cross, a big cross. The other man had the spear, which put through me. And it all fell together. I was afraid of crosses when I was a little girl. If I saw a cross on a priest or a nun, I'd cross the street and run away. And I always didn't know why till my mother was in a nursing home in which they were holding a Catholic service around near her room. And I saw the priest holding a cross like that. And I got absolutely hysterically had trouble calming me down. The whole thing flooded right back to me so clearly.
Wow. I mean, so this memory came via a dream or just it's a memory in your mind?
No. In my feeling. I remember
just a memory in your mind, just like you'd have a memory of going to the store the other day. So you have this memory of this event in past life. Wow, that is astounding.
And it came back to me when I was confronted as an adult with a priest holding a huge cross. I got and I started screaming.
Which makes sense. Which makes sense that your name is Yehudis.
Yeah, my father went down to name me Yehudis. And when I was born, he went down to City Hall to name me Yehudis. Came back to my mother, said he named me as he did Yehudis. And she said, go back and change it to Judith. But I always felt like Yehudis.
Well, what the English name is immaterial, but your Hebrew name is definitely Yehudis. And Yehudis, of course, is a name that stands for the essential tenet of Judaism.
The Hanukkah story.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about the Hanukkah story. I'm just saying that this is the idea of the absolute acceptance of a Jew or Jewess in the oneness of God. So that is going to be an antidote to the problem of the cross, which is, of course, an absolute distortion of that. And I
always felt that was my purpose in life.
Wow, that is an amazing story. Well, here we have it. Right here, you have somebody with
that. In my adulthood, I found out that my mother's father was a Hassid in Europe. He became secular when he came to the States. And I feel that his blood is going through me. It's just where I came.
Your mother's father. Wow. Do you know what group of Hasidim they were connected with?
No, that I don't know. I tried to find out.
You know where they lived?
But yeah, in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, okay.
Yeah, about the same time as the Baal Shem Tov.
Right.
And that's why the first time I read the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, or the Alter Rebbe's Tanya, I got shpilkes. I thought, oh my God, I know this.
Right.
I knew it.
Nice. Wow, that's amazing. So I guess in that case, I will say, Yehudis, I'll say welcome back. But that's to everybody, right? Really, we've all been here before. Now, Reb David, I see once you mention reincarnation, then that's the rest of the class. That's how it goes. All right, Reb David, please. What would you like to share?
You were saying before, when a person does a mitzvah, it's put up on the shelf. Like, this mitzvah is done; it doesn't have to be done again necessarily.
I didn't say that, but
you said like 100, you did 100 mitzvahs.
Those aspects are elevated to their source above.
Right. So what I was going to say was, if it's a prohibition, if it's a negative mitzvah, a prohibition, that mitzvah will have to come down off the shelf if the person breaks the prohibition.
Well, I'm not sure what was up on the shelf in the first place, that he didn't violate that prohibition.
Right.
I don't. It's a little trickier if I say don't eat pork, right? And you go through your life and you didn't eat pork, so what goes up on the shelf? See, when you don't do something, you can't put that on a shelf. So I was referring more to the fulfillment of the positive mitzvot. The only time that you could put a negative mitzvah on the shelf, to my understanding, is when you had a test. You were tested in that area, and you had a challenge in that area, and you overcame the challenge. Now you did something. You overcame that challenge, right? So my life, Baruch Hashem, I haven't eaten pork, but it's not. I haven't overcome any challenge. It hasn't been like I went past a restaurant or something and had a desire ever to eat any pork, So that just not doing something doesn't necessarily go on the shelf that way.
I'm thinking specifically of adultery or murder.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah. So, and here's another, to state the obvious. Even if you've performed the mitzvot and they've already been elevated, still, when a person comes into the world, they're still obligated to keep all of the commandments, right? It's not that now you're exempt from those other ones. You still are obligated as a Jew to fulfill all of them. But in terms of the reincarnation element,
he's talking to me.
In terms of the reincarnation element, you need to do all of the 613. Okay, I want to get back, if possible, to the Maamar. Well, we're almost finished here. Let's just see the next point the Alter Rebbe makes. There's another question or comment. I guess we can take it. It's okay. It's fine. Everyone, we're good. All right. So the Alter Rebbe is saying the garment, and that's really what I'm trying to bring across over here, is that we are, through the performance of the mitzvah, we are creating this. I'm using the analogy of a spacesuit. We're creating this wondrous, beautiful way that the human being, a finite entity, can connect to the infinite. The way through which we do that is we create this spacesuit of infinity. How do you create an infinity spacesuit, you might ask? Through performing the mitzvot. And each one becomes an aspect, right? And that's why 613, for example, is a prime number. Indivisible. It is the 111th prime number. So it's the singularity of singularity of singularity. The singularity of the single, of the tens, and of the hundreds. 111, which is also the numeric value of Aleph, 1, right? So every aspect of the 613 is really bringing across this idea of the oneness, the absolute oneness, and our ability to connect with the infinity. But that now becomes individuated, it becomes specific and particularized in our life through all of the elements that we need to elevate, and thus fulfill all of the mitzvot and create the infinity spacesuit. Unbelievable. And if one mitzvah is missing, then one garment is missing. Now, by doing mitzvahs, a garment is created in the lower Gan Eden. So now the Alter Rebbe is going to distinguish between performance of the mitzvah and the kavanah. So he says that through the action of the mitzvah, there are two levels, very basically. In Gan Eden, the ultimate reward for the neshama, there's a lower Gan Eden and there's a higher Gan Eden. Enough said. So by doing the mitzvah, we have a garment in the lower Gan Eden. By having kavana during a mitzvah, if you have intentionality in doing the mitzvah, a garment is created in the upper Gan Eden. Therefore, Moshe requested to enter the land of Israel. Going to the story of Vaad-Chanan, Moshe was begging Hashem, please let me enter the land of Israel. Why? In order to fulfill the mitzvot which require being there. There's so many mitzvot that a person has to live in Israel to fulfill, right? And Moshe said, I want to push it, go. I want to go there to simply be able to perform the mitzvot. Reb David, please. You have your hand up?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. You were talking about the number 613 and the oneness of everything. And you can explain this to the class if you want. The mispar katan of 613, I just figured out is 1.
Yes. Right. I was doing I think more advanced elements, but there's also if you add the digits 6, 1, and 3, you also get 10, and you just get to that's going to be the oneness, right? So in all levels, the idea of 613, this interesting number, right, really represents absolute oneness and total unity, which ultimately connects us with the infinity, and that's going to be the why we need garments, because the soul I didn't say that 111 was a prime number. I said 613 prime number. And if you prove me wrong, if you can divide it by something other than itself and 1, then
divided by 11.
613?
No, I mean the 111.
Oh, 111. So no, I didn't say 111 is a prime number.
No.
I said that 613 is the 111th prime number.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes.
My understanding is that some of these mitzvot are such that we, being in Israel, Eretz Yisrael, and doing agriculture, that's also one of the mitzvot that we're supposed to achieve in this Gilgul,
Well, not in this Gilgul.
But
because most of the mitzvot, like for instance, a major mitzvah of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year, it's only a rabbinic. We only fulfill it today rabbinically. According to the Torah law, so many laws of agriculture apply only when the majority of the Jewish people are living in Israel, according to the tribes, which hasn't happened since, I don't know how many years ago, since the 10 tribes were expelled from northern Israel. Once the 10 tribes were expelled from northern Israel, there were a lot of mitzvot like Yovel and Shemitah that no longer applied. Certainly Yovel didn't apply from a Torah, according to the Torah law, only from the rabbinic law. Very interesting.
Since back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, this was about 150 years before the destruction of the temple, of the first temple. Okay. Any questions or comments, please? We have 2 more minutes left. So the Alter Rebbe is now going to go on and explain how all of this is connected to fruits, to produce. That's going to be the next section.
You talked before about reincarnation. My first trip to Paris, I was standing in one street and I see a street to the left going downhill. And I'm thinking, I was here. I know those buildings. And I went down the street and I knew the buildings that were on that street.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Look at that. That is amazing. It's amazing. It's like our mind, of course, allows us to think and understand, but the mind is also made in such a way that it hides a lot of stuff.
I'm still wondering about it, but
Well,
and it's been 60 years.
Our conscious mind hides more than it reveals.
Yeah.
Much, much more. When you get down to the subconscious and the spiritual subconscious of our previous lives, it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's all in the subconscious. So that's
It's
amazing.
not visible until something wakes it up.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting that people will have, it's unbelievable. It's really crazy. I mean, you have people who like wake up from a coma and start speaking Mandarin or something, right? Or
Yeah.
I was like, well, that didn't come from this lifetime. Imagine that all of these things are contained within us. It's astonishing, a little scary. So, all right. Well, thank God. Yes, Yehudis, please. You have to unmute.
It's on me.
There are many books written about people's prior life experiences, and including under hypnosis, many people start talking in a different language that they had never studied and recall streets and buildings that they've never been there in this lifetime, but they obviously were there in a prior lifetime.
Right.
Many books written on subjects, also by Jewish authors.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, I'll have to look into that. That sounds very, very amazing. All right, but again, as the Alter Rebbe says, the whole purpose of all of this is in order for us to fulfill all of the mitzvot. So just to keep the main thing, to realize that what all of this is all about ultimately is that we have to make this spacesuit to get us to infinity, to get it to the infinite connection to Hashem. And we do that through the mitzvot. All right, have a very wonderful week, and we will see you, God willing, next week on Tuesday. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.